Good evening, everyone. We are continuing with our wonderful study of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Gita commentary by Swamiji. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to lift our hearts and minds above the ordinary concerns of life, that we may live always in attunement with your divine will. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om, peace. Amen. Let's take just a few minutes of meditation. Today, as it happens, is May 10th, which is Sri Yukteswar's birthday. So let us, as we meditate, especially feel the presence of this great master with us. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, we have no music tonight, unfortunately. Keisha was not with us. So we'll start right in. We're continuing. We're on chapter 6 of the Gita, verse number 40 is where we're starting. And we're starting right in with a continuation of what happens when you strive on the spiritual path but don't reach God realization in this lifetime. And this was a query put to Krishna by Arjuna, and that was Arjuna expressing sort of just the natural fear. If I don't live in the world, if I don't take the pleasures that the world has to give me on the hope of finding the satisfaction that the spiritual path offers me, but I don't quite get my fulfillment from the spiritual path either, then where am I? Have I just wasted my life? It's an extremely profound and real question. And Arjuna serves us all through the Bhagavad Gita by asking these profound and real questions. So we're still in the middle of that discussion because it's one of those discussions that we really have to face into in our spiritual lives. We have to be able to be unafraid. I was seeing just an advertisement today for an American Swami who lives in India, teaches around Europe and various places. I can't even remember what I think he used the word shadow. He was talking about, some kind of shadow work. And this man is a very serious, orthodox, traditional Swami. But he was talking about how sometimes on the spiritual path, serious sadhakas, people who are very serious, still sort of avoid or are afraid to look at certain aspects of themselves. And they just sort of sit over in the corner, and we try to build a foundation on the top of it, but there's something that's unstable underneath. I remember a friend of mine who built a little cottage on the hillside down below Swami Kriyananda's house at Ayodhya at Ananda village. And he just kept adding things to his little cottage, made it really nice. Finally moved in a refrigerator, a gas-powered refrigerator, and that just tipped the balance. And the whole house just fell down the hill. I mean, it was just a little shack is almost the word for it. So, but still, it was all he had, and it was where he lived. But he said it was just a perfect analogy of his own spiritual life, that he just sort of kept adding things on the top, but the foundation was never really anchored. And in the course of his life, he had to go back and pick up all those pieces. So we really, one of the aspects that we have to really cultivate in ourselves is to just kind of, well, not just kind of, but a fearless self-honesty. That we don't fool anyone by pretending to be better than we are. And Arjuna's asking Krishna these scary questions. What happens if I don't make it? What happens if I turn my back on all worldly joys and then get nothing from the spiritual path? We have to actually really be able to answer that question, especially as years go by and we're not really as free as we thought we would be. And in fact, the more we work on the spiritual path, the more we uncover how much work there is to do on the spiritual path. But nonetheless, as I believe I was reading this earlier, I think it was last week that I was reading, the section where Swami said, just don't even think about whether you're succeeding or failing. Just do your best and leave the rest in God's hands. There it is. I did read it last time. But so now we're continuing, and the commentary had talked about 3 kinds of failure on the spiritual path because we're referring to it again. The first kind of failure is where you try for a while, but the karma seems to run out. It doesn't really take hold with you. And so you have these high aspirations that last a short period of time, but pretty soon it becomes a memory. And you just live in the world as you've always lived. And that can be that can be called failure because there you had the opportunity and you didn't take it. But it's also just one of the stages on becoming serious on the path. But often at such times when toward the end of a person's life or even on the deathbed, it comes to you that you met this great saint, or you had this great revelation, or there was this opportunity where you moved into the ashram, and you sort of vaguely think, why did I stop doing that? What could have been more important? All these things that seem so important at the time, you think, what could have been so more important? And there is a sense of having missed the wave. That the wave came to carry me into a greater state of bliss, but I missed the wave. A second kind of failure that they describe is when you have made a terrific effort, and as Swamiji puts it, you fall on the field of battle. Even though you've tried to be heroic in spiritual ways, you just find that you just weren't able to live up to your own ideals. This really did not amount to a failure in my life because by the time the bill came due, I understood things differently. But I remember first reading about Master speaking of the phrase portable paradise, that we'd have within us a portable paradise. And for some reason, I decided in 5 years that I would have that experience, that I would be able at any time to go into this inner world of perfect bliss. And of course, after 5 years, I couldn't. I was certainly better off than I was 5 years previously, but that particular goal was never met. Even to this day has not been met. But by the time I failed in my expectation, I had altered my expectations. But sometimes you can see how we just think that this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be free. I'm not going to have these angers or longings or desires anymore. I'm going to be at peace about this. And we're not. It just didn't work out in exactly the way we thought it was going to work out. And then we feel really discouraged. I mean, that's a more serious kind of failure because we lose heart. And then the third kind of what they call failure is not really failure in a longer lasting sense, but it's that I hoped for God realization and I didn't quite make it. It's just not quite there. It's much more complicated than we know. There's a most interesting story about Ramana Maharshi. Now, I'm going to not quite remember which was which, but it doesn't matter because the story's the same. I think he had a disciple, and the disciple was passing from this world, and Ramana Maharshi was with him, sitting next to him. Ramana Maharshi was a great saint who lived, contemporary of Master's, lived longer than Master did in this world, in India. And he was sitting with his disciple while his disciple was transitioning. And that as we die, I can't give you the deep esoteric of this, so I'll just give you the little bit that I know. You know, where the energy, when the sperm and the ovum unite, they unite at the medulla. That's the first point. And then from the medulla, the physical spine is created. And this is like the astral pattern. The astral pattern is the sense of self at the medulla, and then the chakras where the karma of the incarnation is there. So the physical pattern is manifested because that's where the astral pattern is. And so the spine, the complete spine, is manifested in the first weeks of the embryo in the womb. And then gradually from those nerve centers, the limbs are created. And when we die, even if one dies quickly, but if one dies more slowly, then if there's a vigil and not just the heart stopping or something like that. Sometimes, and I've been with people who've died on a number of occasions, and sometimes I've seen this really dramatically. The energy withdraws from the limbs, it centers in the spine, and then it moves up the spine. One woman's passing, I could just see the energy just moving up her spine, physically, And then we reach the medulla, and the medulla is our sense of individuality, but defined and identified by limitation. And the limitation is the physical body, the astral body, and the causal body. Losing the physical body alone does not liberate us from a limited sense of identity, because we can still define ourselves by the energy body and then seemingly by the causal body. But of course, we're getting very subtle. And most people die. The energy rises up the spine, comes through the chakras, and then what we do is we sink backwards. This is how the masters describe it. We sink backwards into the medulla, because we just sink back into that sense of individuality, of drawn out of the physical body, but not ascending through the spiritual eye into the higher realms. So, as I understand it, as we come up the spine, various of the vrittis sort of try to grab us and keep us from this ascent. A friend of mine who, he didn't have a near-death experience, but he nearly died because of complications from a surgery. And he felt himself at a certain point having, just sort of his soul and his body were separating. And his comment about it was, later, because he lived through it, he said, it's not that easy to get out of your body. He said, because there are all these karmas. He said he could just feel like they were bondages, like ropes of karma. They were just holding him there. Things about his finances, things about his relationships, things about family, things about unfinished business in himself. They were just holding him. So, as I understand it, when Ramana Maharshi's disciple was passing away, he was helping him, just sort of as he met each of those barriers to freedom, helping him sort of let them go and let them go. I've certainly seen somewhat less in the last minutes, like I'm talking about, but over the course of several weeks, there was a friend of mine who died, and I wasn't with her when she passed away, because essentially my part was finished. I was with her for several weeks before she passed away. And we didn't talk a lot, but every so often she'd sort of come to a karmic moment, just a karmic moment, and then she would present an issue, and we would have usually a very relatively brief conversation, but just some key aspect of being able to turn the energy, even from the beginning, when she was first diagnosed with a very serious cancer. She was very convinced that she was going to get well. It wasn't even that she wanted to get well. It was just that she was convinced that that was the way this was supposed to go, that this was Master's plan. She was going to get well, and then these things were going to happen. But her body was really failing. And so we ended up in the hospital where she couldn't even take the chemo very much because the body was retaining liquid and had to be, liquid had to be drained out of her abdomen. It was pretty gruesome. And she had a medical background, so she knew. And I finally said to her in the middle of this, just kind of like, you know, you learn how to say these things. I said, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think your soul's trying to stay in your body, or do you think your soul's trying to get out of your body? And she thought for a minute. She said, I think it's trying to get out. I said, well, if it's trying to get out, maybe we should change what we're doing here. What do you think? Because what we were doing here was not based on it leaving. It was based on thinking that we could somehow make it stay. Okay, she said, like that. And then what was so adorable, first she said, should we tell my husband? I said, yeah, I think so. He'd been talking to me about the fact that he couldn't get her to talk about this. Yeah, I think we should tell him. And then a few minutes later, she said, do you want my iPad? And I could see her just, okay, we're going to just turn and go the other way. And we're just going to start giving things away instead of trying to hold it like this. So the same pattern, not on the level that Ramana Maharshi was doing it, but the pattern that he was doing was on a much more subtle pattern, much more about energy. And then I did see with her and with several others that I've worked with, just at a certain point they would ask the oddest, not odd, but they would ask very specific questions. What about my mother? You know, just like, what about my mother? And you could tell there was a whole big story that was going on behind that, or various other things. Because you would sort of start beginning to move, and then you would see what was wrapped around, what was still holding. And of course that happens on a much more subtle level. So Ramana Maharshi was sitting next to his disciple, and as he described it, you know, he would see the karma arise, and he would help his disciple just pass it away, pass it away. Gave a very interesting picture of the death process, which matched what my friend was saying. There's just all this karma that's holding you. So seemingly, as I remember the story, the man either appeared to have died, or Ramana Maharshi felt that it was fine, and he left. And he said, when he left, the man was free, but after he stepped away, some little bits of karma grabbed him and pulled him down just a little bit. So he didn't quite have his freedom. So then the next time, whether it was, which was the disciple and which was Ramana's mother, that he stayed with her until she was completely finished. He didn't risk leaving her on her own. Now, it's such a beautiful story about how the Guru works with you and how the karma works, how these things arise. But you know, we don't have to wait until we're passing out of this body and hope that in the last minute we can do something about it. When I was very early on the spiritual path, this would have been the summer of 1966, and there was a group of us who were reading Vivekananda's books and Ramakrishna's books and talking among ourselves, trying to understand the spiritual path. And someone in there remembered learning that hearing is the last sound to go. And we knew something about the Om sound. Now, you have to bear in mind, in 1966, you couldn't get access like you can now. That was what, like 50 years ago. That's really a long time in Eastern spirituality coming to the USA. Of course, there was no internet, and there were barely any bookstores. So you just couldn't get things. So we had a few books, and we had to guess. So if hearing is the last sound to go, and this man was talking about how he used to like to listen to the Indy 500 race car on the radio, on the television, because it was the roar of the engines, which he realized now, because he talked about how he really liked to listen to it, but he realized he was actually just listening to the sound of the Om through that. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he used to like to trap a fly and have it buzz in his ear at the same time for the same reason, because it was something with the Om. So if sound is the last to go, he had this plan that he would get one of those recordings, like of the motor cars, and he would just wear it so that it would like make the Om sound in his ears. You know, it's like there's always American ingenuity trying to sort of outsmart the ancient teachings. I mean, he was half joking. We were all, you know, always just looking for a way to be more clever with it. But now, let's see, where was I going to talk about? But I was talking about how, let me see if I can pull back where I was. Yes, I know what I was saying. It's like we don't want to have to wait. We don't want to have to try to squeeze it all in those last days. And this was this very, I'm sure, I know the Swami who was making this presentation. He has a great deal of integrity in his teaching, and I'm sure that he saw that people were not integrated. They're not fully understanding. So coming back to this fear of failure and this thought, what if I don't make it? And this setting ourselves an expectation that's unrealistic. Like my 5 years and I'll have the portable paradise. I could have made myself unhappy over that. But I had the common sense and the good karma to realize that it wasn't that I had failed in my expectation. It's that my expectation was not realistic. And if you set yourself something that you can't possibly achieve, it's a very fine line, because we need to be very dynamic in our faith and our belief. But I've shared with you, and I did last week, I think, it's just like I've never been able to set myself a spiritual goal. So Swami's paragraph in here, which I emphasized, is very important to me. Just do my best and leave the rest to God. And if, you know, in the hour of my death, I see that there's all these things that are holding me, well, that's just the facts of the matter. And I'll just get the opportunity to try again and be born where I ended. And this is where I'm going to start talking now, go now, which is exactly what these next chapters talk about. What happens to us if we don't become fully liberated? And it's very interesting. So first, chapter 6, verse number 40, the Blessed Lord, Krishna, answered, saying to Arjuna, "O my son, one who performs right actions can never be destroyed, whether in this world or the next. His fate will never be evil." So this is where Swami emphasizes, and the Gita emphasizes, spiritual progress is not an either-or. It's not like you're either spiritual or you're damned. I mean, this is a very Christian point of view, actually. You have to take Jesus Christ as your only Savior, and if you don't, you just go to hell. And that's basically it. My friend Savitri, who was raised in a family where it was a very, very rigid traditional Christianity, she just talked about the incredible tension her mother was under as she was growing up as a child. No, as my friend was growing up as a child, the fear that her mother had that if her daughter did not accept Jesus Christ as her only Savior, then the mother was going to go to heaven, but the daughter was going to go to hell. I mean, with all due respect, what a horrible teaching. And so the pressure on my friend to accept the Lord Jesus Christ, because her mother was, just neurotically terrified that if she didn't do it, this awful thing was going to happen. There's other things in there. There's one where the day of rapture is going to come and the saved are going to disappear and go to heaven and the damned are going to remain. One poor man raised in that context, every time he came home, immediately he'd have to try to find members of his family because he lived in the fear that while he was at school, the day of rapture would come and all his people would be taken away and he would be left to be the only one. Horrible teachings. But of course, it forces people to do things, but it's such an either or. You're damned and I'm saved. And we carry that, especially Westerners carry that because we have a very either or kind of logic. The Eastern approach is that there's many interpretations to one truth. The Western approach is this logical, we're going to pin it down, this is what it means and this is what it doesn't mean. And so we either succeed or we fail. That's how we read it. Whereas in fact, we're a work in progress. And of course, reincarnation absolutely saves you in this. This is why reincarnation is such a glorious and beautiful teaching, because it just says that we just keep going. And then we add in, which the commentary talks about, the astral world. So we shed a physical body, but shedding a physical body is not the end of anything. It's just like, it's a chapter book, as the children call them when they grow up and can read enough. You get in the 4th or 5th grade and you start reading chapter books, which is a big step because, little books, you just have one story from start to finish. But when you have a big book, you have chapters, you have a chapter book. And so our lives are chapter books. And it's true that, oftentimes the author will bring something to a conclusion, but then you just start the next chapter. There's a white space in the page, and there's a psychic feeling, or if your mother is reading it to you, she'll say, that's enough for tonight, we'll continue tomorrow. And then you sneak the book out and read it yourself, with the flashlight on at night. If you were someone who lived in my house, that's what you did. But the story didn't end, it just went into the next phase. So we have this false idea that shedding the body actually means something. And it does, but not very much. So I remember Swamiji just saying it just like this. This was right after my mother died. And it was just the context brought it up. He said, nothing happens when you die. He said, nothing happens when you die. And he emphasized that very strongly. Well, you think something happens, something seems to happen from this side. But what he meant by that is so much less happens to you, because we think that there's just like this big shift of something. But we're just ourselves. We're just, and as I understand it, and as I somewhat intuitively remember it, you just continue. You just go on. That was my friend Paula, when she was on her deathbed, 24 hours from passing. She died very, very consciously. She called Swamiji, she talked to Swamiji on the phone, and she said, I hope they have a job for me in the astral world, sir. You know I like to be busy. And Swamiji said, Paula, I'm sure they're expecting you and they've got something ready. And later, because I felt Paula so much with me right after she passed, actually, I still can feel her at times. I said to Swami, is she conscious of us here? And Swami just went like this, oh yes. Like, of course she is. She is totally in love with this family, all of us. And she did everything she could to help us while she was in her body. Why would it be any different when she's not? Yeah, like what is fundamentally going to change? We won't become somebody else. We'll just shift over, as Swami says, into the astral world. So this is the first answer. One who performs right actions can never be destroyed. It's not like you've done all this good, positive effort, service, bhakti, meditation, whatever, but you didn't make it, it's over for you. It's like, what a horrible concept of God. And this was what Jesus came also to combat, because the corrupt priesthood was controlling the people by constantly threatening them if they didn't do exactly everything that they were supposed to do according to the letter of the law, literally. And a lot of the letter of the law had been turned to enrich their own coffers. then you would be judged unworthy, and that would be that. It's thinking people, when people would come to my beginning meditation classes when I would teach that class years ago, they would often tell me that they were atheists. They would come to just get a little stress relief, and there are these pictures of the gurus. They would tell me they were atheists. I would say, well, describe to me the God you don't believe in. And so then they would describe to me the God they don't believe in, and I would agree with them that no thinking, rational person would believe in that God. And if that was God, then I was an atheist too. So let's go to another concept. So a lot of times it's not really that we've rejected divinity. We've just rejected some horrible misinterpretation of what that divinity might be. So this paragraph, this verse in the Gita is sometimes translated to say, that Krishna says to Arjuna, my devotee is never lost, which it becomes then more a personal promise of Krishna. That's a poetic translation of it. Here he says, whether in this world or the next, his fate will never be evil, that the good that he's done will stay with him. So let me just think what I wanted to say here. Wait, give me a second. Right. The way of thinking about it also is another way to think about the whole question that this whole section of the Gita is about. Is, we're generally moving toward this goal. Why? What else could we do that would be better than to keep trying? And that's really the dichotomy we're working with. And there's also, there's a trick in here, which was referred to in the last session that we were having. Once you really start moving in this inward direction, once you have this sort of this feeling inside, and this is, I'm not sure I fully explained it, but in a previous class, but I know I was referring to it, that the unifying reality of people who come to Ananda is that somehow, in some way, they've had an intuitive experience that there is a profound inner world. And that profound inner world is ultimately more real and more important than this enormous outer world that we see. Now, we can have that kind of a profound realization, whether we're just born with it, whether some kind of a mystical event happens to it, whether we're persuaded by reading philosophical treatise, wherever it comes from, somewhere we recognize that, the veil parts for even just a moment. I remember being 10 years old, looking out the front window at my neighbor mowing his lawn. I don't know why that was the image, but that's what it was. I was watching him mow the lawn. And I had this feeling that if I stared intently enough, the scene in front of me would shift into a scene that I sort of knew was the real scene. That I knew somehow that this neighbor mowing his lawn was just some kind of a thin veil over what I actually wanted to be seeing. And I just, as a kid, I kind of remember standing at that window, just concentrating with everything I could, trying to force the neighbor and his lawnmower to manifest a greater reality. And they didn't. He just continued to mow his lawn. But obviously I was a yogi in past lives. There's no question about it, given the life I've lived. But I knew that. I knew that somewhere. And so once we know that, and this is really the stages on the spiritual path, there just comes a point in our spiritual evolution where what choice do I have? Just what choice do I have? And that's how we come to this ease of, whether I succeed, whether I fail, it just doesn't make any difference, because what choice do I have? that was Peter's answer to Jesus, which was so powerful when many of the disciples were leaving Jesus because Jesus was being very confusing, telling them to eat my body and drink my blood, because he knew that he was about to be crucified and it was going to get ugly. And they were all going to be persecuted, and it really wasn't going to be a lot of fun. And Jesus knew that he needed to separate, he needed to drive away those who could hold to the path as long as Jesus was there and it was relatively easy. But after Jesus died and the persecution started, it needed to be a much stronger core, because they were going to have to carry each other, and he couldn't have any weak links there. Swami said Master also did the same at the end of his life. He made it difficult for people, and many left at the end. It wasn't really that they were at fault, it's just their time was done. They needed to express themselves in a different way, not to leave Master necessarily, but to move perhaps out of the monastery or whatever it was happening. So when lots of people were leaving Jesus, Jesus said to Peter, will you also leave me? And Peter said, where will I go, Lord? Where could I go, Lord? And that's just like, I love that story. I just love it, because it says so much about what the real and the right attitude was. Because what Peter gave no sign that he understood the esoteric meaning of what Jesus was saying. It wasn't, his fundamental commitment was not based on the fact that he had it all reasoned out. It was based on, what else could I do? Just what else could I do? And this is what we need to constantly cultivate within ourselves. What else could I do? How could I ever be satisfied doing everything else? It's not a matter of where you live or what you look like or whether you're married or whether you're a monk. It's much, much deeper than the form that it takes. It's just a self-definition. I often encourage people who are less than stellar at their sadhana practice, for example. I mean, there was this woman that, she was very dear and she really loved everything that we are. She loved the vibration and she participated in everything, but she was not a good meditator. But she regularly attended a couple of events in which there was always a portion of, a notable portion of meditation. Not just the 5 minutes that I was doing at the class, but a half an hour, an hour. And I said, well, you come every Sunday and you come every Tuesday morning or whatever it was, and you meditate. I said, you meditate regularly. You are a person who regularly meditates. You have a regular meditation practice. Now, that's not necessarily twice a day, but it's regular because you constantly do it, and you don't stop. It's just a little infrequent, but it's regular. You're a regular meditator. You're a person who meditates. And I wasn't trying to play games with words. I was trying to say that when it comes to seeking God, most people don't. Period. They just don't. They're just interested in amazingly other things. Just totally entertained with just one superficial thing after another. So any part of us that recognizes the need for this inner world, we should be applauding ourselves, not denigrating what we can't do. This is what Swami was saying in the paragraph I emphasized so much last week, which was just do your best. And even if your best is embarrassing, it's still better than most of the people in the world. Don't compare yourself to anyone. In fact, when I moved, I lived at the Ananda village for 16 years. And Ananda village, especially at the beginning, but all the way through, was very remote, very isolated. You had to be very dedicated to live there. Conditions, especially in the first 10 years, were primitive. That's the only word for it. They gradually became simple, but they were primitive at the beginning. And we were a very dedicated bunch. If you weren't really dedicated, you really You just couldn't handle it. And then Swamiji sent me here, which is the Palo Alto Silicon Valley area, and we started actually there was a small center here, and we just began to expand and do more. And at first, I measured everyone against life members of the Ananda monastic order. I mean, that to me was what it was to be on the spiritual path, life members of the Ananda monastic order. And as you can imagine, that didn't go over very well. And there were very few people who were like that, because they wouldn't be living and working and being here if that's what they were. Finally, I just flipped it around. I just completely turned it on its head. And I thought, if they want God at all, if that inner awakening has come at all, then hallelujah, praise the Lord. It sets you apart immediately from almost everyone on this planet. And I don't say that to justify our weaknesses. I say that to actually really put us where we belong. And those who have accepted Master as a guru and have even taken Kriya and have these other practices, and I often say to myself, I am the disciple of a great Master. Just like I am the disciple of a great Master. I can add a few other things on top of that. I've been doing this for a while. I had a long and wonderful opportunity to be with Swami Kriyananda, but I am the disciple of a great Master. My salvation is assured. And where else could I go? See, that's the extra part. Where else could I go? This would chase me wherever I went. It would just come out of the soil of myself and would interfere with any other reality. And maybe I'm not as good at acting it out as I would like to be, but I will be. This is a chapter book. Okay. So, let's see. So Swami also quotes Master saying here, so long as you continue to make the effort, God will never let you down. So now chapter 6, verse 41, just some interesting things here. A fallen but sincere yogi gains entry after death into the world of the virtuous. He may remain there for many years, and afterward he is reborn on earth into a good and prosperous home. So here's how Swami talks about this. It's very interesting. Let's see. Maybe you're a little discouraged by your lack of success. This is sort of the second way that you can fail. So he says the fallen yogi described here is one who, as yet imperfect in his spiritual quest, has temporarily slackened or even abandoned his spiritual efforts. Here, let me say it again. We get it right. Okay. Yes, that's what I was looking for. He's otherwise been unsuccessful, but he's still eager to continue. Those who have been unsuccessful but are eager to continue may return to earth relatively soon, because spiritual progress, except for those who have attained a high state of advancement, is not possible for them in the astral spheres. Life there, for the virtuous, is so beautiful and harmonious that one who is only a visitor from the earth plane of existence, which means that they have material karma to work out. You haven't transcended the material plane altogether. That's a different level, but those are only visiting from the material plane, having still some material karma to work out, feel little or no incentive to continue his spiritual practice. Because the very realm to which he is attracted will be inhabited by those whose tastes and interests are similar to his own. They may contain beloved family members or have such conditions as will help him to fulfill some deep personal desire. Beautiful music, beautiful scenery, a harmonious community can be attained better in the astral world than on earth. I remember when a woman who was part of our community for years here, her name was Linda, and she didn't live in the community, she lived outside, and her husband was very well-to-do, and she had a very lovely home, and she had an extraordinary sense of aesthetics, and she was very generous, and she took over the responsibility for many years. For every holiday, she would simply decorate our temple. She would spend her husband's money and just, make things absolutely beautiful. And it was wonderful. We all enjoyed what she did, and she loved doing it. And her own home was just filled with beautiful things and crystals and spiritual objects, and all of a very light and beautiful nature. She developed cancer and died. She was in her 50s, I think, when she died. Let me think about it for a minute. Yeah, she must have been in her 50s. And when she was in the last weeks of her life, Swamiji came to visit her. And this is talked about. Nalini wrote this wonderful book called Transitions with Grace, published by Crystal Clarity Publishers. It's not as well known as it should be. It's a wonderful book, and it has about 25 stories of yogis or someone who was very close with yogis and how they died. And Linda's story is in there. And Swami was talking to Linda, and Linda said to Swami, "Tell me about the astral world," because she knew she was on her way to the astral world. And he talked about it in wonderful ways. And then he said to her, he said, "Be careful, because you have such a love for beauty and for harmony and for, just refined and uplifted things. You're going to really love the astral world. And you're going to forget that there's anything higher. You're going to forget about spiritual practice, and you're going to forget about realizing God, because you're just going to be so happy there. Because a refined person, the astral worlds are homogeneous in their vibrations. The problem with Earth is it's heterogeneous in its vibrations, which is that even though there are many wonderful spiritual people here, there are also many evil people. And in any atmosphere, even in one family, there can be refined people and people who are not refined at all. You may have experienced that in your own life. It's a very mixed bag on this planet. And that's one of the reasons why there is so much incentive to grow, because there is this constant contrast between what this world is like and what we remember in our spirit is really possible. Not just remembering the astral world, although that plays a part in it, but also we remember spiritual freedom, and we have an incentive to rise to it. So, just a moment, let me get my thoughts. So he was talking to Linda. But the astral world is homogeneous vibrations, which is, if you're on a lower plane, you're on a lower plane, and it's dark people do not inhabit the higher realms, and higher people are not condemned to the dark realms. The dark realms often have angels who are trying to help them. A woman who tried to commit suicide and went all the way to the other side, but she returned, and she told the story about being in the realm where suicides were trapped. And they were not being punished by God, who was mad at them, but the absolute life-negating consciousness that caused them to throw away their own lives. And of course, people commit suicide for different reasons. There are many reasons for committing suicide, is what I mean. Some of them are far more nefarious than others. There was a woman, for example, who had lived in our community for a few years, but was profoundly mentally unbalanced, a condition which had been, basically her brain had been destroyed. She'd been on so many psychiatric drugs since she was a child, that she just really literally didn't have a normal brain anymore, quite apart from her psychiatric issues. And she stepped off a building, a high building, And Swami said, it wasn't really, she was hardly even responsible for doing that because her consciousness had been so scrambled. Of course, it wasn't good karma. But then there's people who commit suicide in anger to get back at someone. And that's a much more nefarious thing. But this woman, she was in the realm where there were a lot of people who had committed suicide, and she could tell by by intuition, and also by somewhat by their dress, by how they were wearing. Some of them had been there for a really long time. But she said what kept them trapped was the anguish of their own consciousness. The anger or the despair or whatever it was that caused them to throw away their life. They were trapped. And she was there with them, and seeing where she was, she became suddenly quite horror-stricken at what she had done. And, well, I believe the way her story went, she wasn't a religious person, but suddenly just the word Jesus came into her mind. And just when she thought of Jesus like this, it's like suddenly the whole energy of where she was began to shift, and she looked up, because the characteristic of the suicides is they were all looking down. She looked up, and she saw that there was a whole host of angels just right there with all these despairing people. But they were so busy looking down into their darkness that they didn't know it. Isn't that something? Because I hope they have a job for me. I like to be busy. So there would be people who would be wanting to help, just because there are people who want to help. Just like in this world, there are people who are drawn to help, that kind of suffering. But as soon as she looked up, she saw the angels, and she rose out of it, and then in fact, rose all the way back into her body, just left that world altogether. But so the angels, angelic beings, can go down in vibration to denser places, but denser vibrations, sometimes they can see a higher realm, but they can't enter it until their own vibration changes. So for people who are refined and people who are spiritually inspired, and he said to Linda, you'll be with saints and angels, because she was a very, very pure-hearted person. And you'll love it there. You'll just be with saints and angels. And it says here that sometimes they can spend, let's see how we would say it. Sometimes you can spend a really long time in the astral world before material karma grabs you and you have to go. Sometimes you would do that for many other reasons. And Swami says also that the memory, those astral memories, are what give us the incentive to try to create beauty on this earth. And he even said about our Ananda communities that we have a memory of a perfect astral community, which is one of the reasons that we all get along so well without needing a lot of rules and systems to help us to get along. We've just carried into this world the memory of our astral harmony. And so we keep trying to recreate it in this world. I was extremely interested when we, like in 1989, when a group of sympathetic investors purchased the property where we have our community. We've leased it from them all these years. When we first moved into it, the buildings were run down, and we fixed them up to a certain extent. They're still old, but we fixed them up greatly from what they were when we came. But the buildings were somewhat run down. But the people who then chose to live in them made them even darker and worse. When we sort of examined it, people would have, they would keep the curtains closed, the curtains would be dark, they would put dark rugs and dark furniture, dark couches, dark furniture, the lights would be dim. It was like the astral world that they came from was dimly lighted and brown, so that's how they felt at home. And we moved into the same apartments. We painted the walls light, we took out all the dark furniture, we took out all the dark rugs, we took out all the dark curtains, and all of a sudden the units were just bright and cheerful, and it was just because that's the astral world that we come from. That's the astral world of beauty and of harmony and of light, lovely colors and uplifted feelings. And so we might pass through it we might want to come back to this world immediately, but we're going to come back and try to recreate here the beauty that we remember. And that's what Linda was doing, and that's why Swami was urging her not to get lost there too long. So let's see what else. Master also said, Swami says, the time of a serious devotee, one who's really eager to realize God, spends in the astral world depend, among other factors, on how intense their desire is to continue their spiritual progress and on their compatibility with karmic conditions on this earth or on some other planet at the time. Master writes that there are countless inhabited planets in the material universe. People are by no means limited to reincarnating on this earth. We can incarnate in many places. Swami asked Master that. Is there such a thing as an earthling? No, you just live on the earth when the yuga cycle is in the right place, or the conditions are in the right place, or people that you need to associate with are also incarnated here. But we can choose from the astral world. Master described the material world as like the little gondola basket. If you have a great big hot air balloon and then you have the little basket underneath it, he said the astral world is the giant balloon and the material world is just this little thing underneath it. And there's countless planets here. He also has this wonderful statement now. The universe, considered by modern astronomy to be almost devoid of conditions for intelligent life, is actually teeming with it. Master said even the stars are peopled with intelligent beings with highly refined bodies whose food and breath is fiery light. It's just, Master would throw out phrases like that, and you'd have to just think about it. I love this particularly because my formal education contributed very little to my life. I would say nothing. I went through 13 years of school, 1 year of college, and never finished. But I don't remember learning anything useful in school, really, honestly, at all. I knew how to read. I learned to read somewhere much before I got to school. But I specifically remember in the 4th or 5th grade, we were having some kind of a science lesson. And the teacher said, these are the conditions of life. And there's some kind of scientific formula about air and oxygen and food. It's all, you can see how much of an impression it made on me. But it was just like, it was defined like that. And then my teacher went on to declare that there was no other planets, there were no other planets in which those conditions existed, and therefore there was no life on any other planet. And I was just a little twerp of a kid. And I asked the most obvious question, couldn't there be a form of life that was adapted to other conditions? I think I asked it even in those words. And my teacher said, no. And I thought to myself, you are an idiot. And you're trying to teach me. How could you possibly make a declaration like that? It just was so transparent to me. So I was particularly gratified when I read this. Even the stars, where they breathe fire. Of course they can breathe fire. How little imagination do you have that think that they can only breathe what we breathe? It's just, you have to just open up your thinking in countless ways. And Master said that the so-called UFOs and spaceships coming, he said, oh, it's all true. It's all true. It's just, we haven't yet been able to figure this out. There's this remarkable phenomenon of crop circles, which I'll just digress for just a moment, which is these patterns that appear in fields of wheat and so on, and in particular places in England they happen a great deal. And I've never been much for far out sort of things. I'm a very practical sort of person. I don't have experiences, and I just don't think in those terms. But a number of years ago, was 10 or 20 years ago, probably in the 90s, Swamiji, we went to Italy to visit with him, and he wanted us to watch this movie, and it was all about crop circles. I'm sure there are many now. This one was called Star Dreams, with a Z on the end of it. I haven't really seen more than one, but I presume it's still out there somewhere. And it was just all about crop circles, and it was all about these very colorful characters who are really involved in crop circles. And the colorful characters, you can see why crop circles might not have a great reputation among certain circles, because some of these people were eccentric in the extreme. But my goodness, the patterns themselves were so beautiful. And Swamiji had a book that someone had given him of photographs, and we were turning the pages, and they were just exquisite. And all the ideas that people go out in the middle of the night with a tractor and make these things, it was so easily debunked by countless things, if you have any interest in wanting to believe it. It was, Swamiji, we had conversations. What is it? Swamiji felt the most likely explanation was that it was projected by thought, by the power of thought, from some higher civilizations, and they were trying to communicate with us. And they were just trying to give us these images, and you could feel in those images that there was some, elevated consciousness. I couldn't decipher the message, but it was really easy. Or Swami said the other alternative is that the earth itself is projecting it upward, that the presiding deities of the planet are projecting these things upward. But he felt that more likely it was thought transference, because they would happen just instantaneously. Like you'd go out for lunch and you'd come back and there'd be this huge pattern in your field. Just couldn't be done by material means. But anyway, that's just all about all the different places that we could be. One of my friends, who has a great affection for really hot weather, loves to hike in the desert in the summer, when the temperatures are well over 100 degrees, and he just feels like he's just from a star. He's from a planet, much, as he put it, a planet much closer to the sun than this one. And he just feels quite comfortable in temperatures that other people find quite hot. So who knows? Who knows any of those things? So he said also another reason why we stay in the astral world for a long time, it's also human. It's that we're just fed up with the material plane and we just don't want to see it for a while. I've just had it with Earth. I'm just going to just have a sojourn. I'm just going to take a break. It's all, what you have to realize is all of this seems very esoteric, but it's really just you and me living our lives. We go into these worlds in the movies and so on, and sometimes they get it pretty right. Conditions are different. We can move. We're not burdened by physical bodies, but we're still ourselves. That's when Swami said nothing happens when you die. And just the desire to have a break. I remember when I had this job for a couple of years that I was just so incompetent at Ananda Village. I was so incompetent. Swami tried so hard to help me learn how to be competent in it, and I just was incapable of learning. Now I could learn it, but then I was in my 20s. I didn't know how to learn. So he fired me. He switched my position with someone else's position because he knew she would be better at what I was doing and I would be happier and better at what she was doing. So he told me on a Friday that he was going to make this switch. And I knew it was a sign of failure on my part. And I said to Swamiji, I know that you have more to say to me, and I know that there's some things I'm going to have to face and learn here. But why don't we wait until Monday to talk, so that for 2.5 days I can just enjoy the fact that I don't have to do this anymore. And he said, okay. So for 2.5 days, I just was, oh gosh, I don't have to do this awful, disastrous project any longer. And then on Monday, he told me some things that I really needed to learn. It was real depressing. But it's like Sure, I just want a break. You could see that on a bigger scale, It was a hard life on the earth plane. I had a lot of disappointments. I was crucified. Everybody betrayed me. It was just pretty bad. I'm just going to be in this beautiful world for a while where everything is harmonious and nice, just to restore my equanimity, my spirit again. It's perfectly true. This is just what's happening. What if we're not completely liberated? What if we still have material karma that we have to come back to, but we're still deeply spiritual people? We get to be in virtuous angelic realms. All of our best qualities are strengthened and rewarded, but we still have to come back. Not so bad. My devotee is never lost. He never meets an evil end. We are who we are. Well, but then it also makes that comment, afterward he is reborn on earth into a good and prosperous home. Swami also mentions that it's very good karma to be born into a prosperous home, because then you can have everything you want, and you don't have to spend your whole lifetime trying to get things. So you spend an entire lifetime trying to earn enough money to have a lot of things, only to realize at the end that it wasn't worth it, that it was just a waste of an incarnation. So if you're born into a prosperous home, you get your desires fulfilled much faster. This is just a simple way to say it. You get to have beauty around you. You get to find out what the satisfaction of being able to do this is. A friend of mine, a woman friend of mine, her mother died when she was in her mid to late teens. And just because of who she was and the relationship she had with her father, which was all positive, she just sort of began to run the house for him because she really enjoyed that. So she had her father's credit cards, and she had the whole house to do anything she wanted. So she could buy and do anything that she would have been able to do as an adult wife, matron, or having her own home somewhere. But she got to do it all before she was 20. So by the time she was 20, she had enjoyed it. It was fine, but she was already finished. She just didn't have to do it anymore, and went on to live in a completely different way, much more spiritually focused and so on, and free. And all of us, prosperity is good karma if we use it for good. So that's why he says, if you're a sincere yogi, you'll get to be born into a prosperous home. Good and prosperous means that you get a solid upbringing. A friend was told by an astrologer that a very, very auspicious period in his life, the astrologer said, was wasted in your first 18 years. And Swamiji took issue with that. He said it's very good karma to have very auspicious periods through your growing up years, because it completely orients you to have a positive expectation about life. So if you're born into a good and prosperous home, one that's supportive, that allows you to have opportunities, education, emotional stability, this is all very, very good karma, so that you can then get on with the job and won't have to struggle against those kinds of obstacles. Okay, so chapter 6, verse 42. On the other hand, he may reincarnate on earth in a family of enlightened yogis. Such a birth in this world, however, is difficult to attain. In his new family, he recovers the yogic discrimination he attained formerly, and sets himself with even greater zeal to achieve final spiritual liberation. He says, Krishna describes here what happens to the third kind of, quote, fallen yogi. Fallen only in the sense that in death he has not fully expiated his conscious and subconscious ego-motivated desires. Rebirth in the home of advanced yogis is difficult to attain. For such people often don't marry, and those who do marry often prefer not to have children. Now, we have had the experience in our Ananda community of, several generations of children being born into those families. I remember when the first crop was attaining adulthood, and one could talk to them peer to peer. And I remember saying to one of the children, who was now an adult, And I said, I don't mean this in any unkind way, but you were kind of a Petri dish experiment for all of us, precisely because of this verse in the Gita. It wasn't just a question of, it was also a question of how would you turn out, because we were doing an experiment that there was no precedent for it that we knew. We weren't forest rishis or anything like that. We were just ordinary folk having marriages and families, but in a very unusual environment. Like, who would come? Who would join us? Interestingly, only a small percentage of those born into the Ananda communities have made Ananda their life. Swami wisely set up a rule at the beginning that you can't inherit membership. You have to. Children are not automatically members. That at the age of 18 or older, when you're old enough to really make a decision, you have to decide for yourself whether this is your life. It was also in fairness to the children, so that they just, we raise them with the ability to make a choice rather than raise them to make the choice. So it's not like we raise them up that this is what your path is, this is what you have to do. We tried to raise them up with the principles upon which this path was built. And of course, the example of their parents and all the people around them, and knowing from an early age, that self-realization is an option, and that there is this path, all of these choices, but only a small percentage, and I don't know what that might be, but it's small, of children who were born and raised in it, who actually then, of their own free will, choose it. So I've wondered about that. And I actually joke about the children who are born and raised in Ananda. I call them 642s, because that's the chapter and verse in the Gita that says you'll be born to a family of enlightened yogis. And you would think, since it's a hard birth to get, that our percentage would be higher, but it isn't. So be it. However, there's very few, I dare say none, of the children who were born and raised in that environment do not bear the marks of their upbringing, which is to say, people of enormous integrity and energy and creativity, exceedingly fine people. I can't give you an actual list, but with very few exceptions, they grow up to be exceedingly fine people. So you can't even say, you can't just make a narrow thing, they have to be part of Ananda in order to have benefited from that birth. Not at all. They had very, very good karma to be brought into such an atmosphere, and they're using it in the way that their soul wants to use it. And fortunately, we are not so narrow in our thinking that it really matters. And many of the parents talk about in how many ways the values and the understanding of life that was their entire purpose in raising the children has just been completely absorbed. And it's just being expressed as an artist, or as a banker, or as an investment counselor, or as a teacher, or as a builder, any number of things. But it's the vibration with which we do things that matter. The form of it is meaningless. You can have all the right form and none of the right consciousness, and it doesn't mean anything at all. God reads the heart. It's really who we are that matters, not how we present ourselves. So, let's see what comes next. There's another part of this, and this is something that's also a very, very important reality to take deep within ourselves. And he says it very simply. One's past life spiritual attainments are retained enduringly in the astral brain. Like seeds, they sprout when the conditions are right. Meaning, because this is again the way, the poetic translation, my devotee is never lost. So I've given my whole energy, I've given my whole life force to developing myself spiritually. I may not seem to have accomplished very much. See, there's also a problem there. we don't know what we're working against. We don't know, we can't see what the karmic balance actually is. And so we may think that we haven't progressed very far, but we may in fact the whole time have just been neutralizing some negative karmic accumulation that we may have finished neutralizing. And so in fact, now that that is dissolved, our spiritual life may just soar from that point forward. And so all that effort, which apparently didn't, bring us to a great state of samadhi, may have been, just fulfilling perfectly and freeing us for that next reality. There's just absolutely no way to know. There's just absolutely no way to know unless we ourselves are God realized. We can't tell. We're finishing karma. But so we also just sort of like what happens to us. And it says here, past life attainments are retained enduringly in the astral brain. See, what this means is, it's like when the physical brain dies, we become the vibration of energy. The astral body is the energy body. It's the chakras. It's our vibration of actual consciousness only, without the dulling influence of the material world. As Swami describes it, just everything in the astral world, the physical body dulls our perceptions. That's why he says the desire for beautiful sights and beautiful music and harmonious relationships can be more powerfully fulfilled in the astral world because we can experience the vibrations directly. We don't have to go through the physical senses in order to experience it. We can just merge with those vibrations. And so in the movies, the way they have it, when the physical person dies and then the same actor or actress gets up and is the same person, except now they're non-material and they can't touch things. I mean, nowadays we see it so regularly, and it's actually quite interesting. It's just a regular, natural part of the most mainstream kind of entertainment, is this understanding that you can still be yourself, but you can be non-material. So, because we're dealing with actors and actresses, they still it's the same body. They really look exactly the same, but they make it non-material with special effects. But when we die physically in real life and not in the movies, the vibration of our consciousness in the astral form, which the physical body is an imitation of that, but it's light, it's energy, just like in the movies. It's not material, but it also apparently looks very much like what we look like. Sri Yukteswar, in Autobiography of a Yogi, in the chapter Resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, makes the very interesting statement. He says he went into residence in a high astral universe where people are very advanced spiritually, and he could help them finish their liberation. They have no more physical karma. They're just resolving astral karma and then causal karma, and then they're free. How that works, I don't know. Sri Yukteswar is being an avatar on that planet. So he's totally free and he's helping on that planet. And he said he kept, the physical body he kept was himself as an elderly person. And that's how he looks on that planet. He said most people in the astral world make a body that looks about 25. And I've thought about that as a woman who is considerably more than 25 at this point. How, let me see, even after a lifetime of yoga, I still notice that I'm aging. And I think, why do I care? Why do I notice even what to speak of? Why is there just a little bit of a twinge of, But then he said, in the astral world, you make a body that's 25. So there's some like inherent pattern, that youthfulness. And 25 is just about, the middle. You're fully developed and you haven't begun to fall apart yet. It's just right there. And so that's what we remember. However, what I'm really saying is that the vibration of our consciousness goes there. And it's not like if God likes you, he'll be nice to you or anything like that, or only certain people who have, been to the right church actually get to go into heaven. It's just vibrations. We are a certain vibration of consciousness, period. That's just who we are. And it's transferred from life to lifetime in the chakras. The chakras are non-physical. They're fields of energy. And if the whole subject of the chakras is a magnificent subject, and if you go to my YouTube channel and type in the word chakras, I've done a lot of classes. But it's just the physical pattern is in the chakras, and it goes into the astral world, and we vibrate at exactly what we are without the interfering confusion of a physical body and a physical brain and the physical senses. So we just are what we are. And he puts it this way: past life spiritual attainments are retained enduringly in the astral brain, and then they sprout when the conditions are right. So when it's time for us to go back to the material world, we get drawn, and whatever we know and don't know goes with us. And when we're in the astral world, whatever astral vibration is exactly who we are. It's mathematical. It's metaphysics is what it is. That's what metaphysics really is. So you come back into this world with whatever it is, into a material world, with whatever seeds of material desire, unlearned karmic lessons, or spiritual determination and energy to face into and overcome and grow and finish this project. And we just bring it right back. I think I don't know how it really works, but there's a certain point at which conditions are right and those desires sprout. I imagine it like you're just in the astral world, and then suddenly you get restless. Just somehow you're not quite content anymore. These seeds are beginning to sprout, or you've learned everything you can learn, rested in whatever way you needed to rest and renew, waited for your buddies. I mean, I know that many of us came because Swami came. Master called Swami, and then Swami called us. We're all tied to him. That was why I said to him once, "Sir, next time can we wait for a higher yuga? Do we have to come to this one again? Because I know if he comes, we'll come with him. We have to come with him. Some of us will." That was what Paula also said to Swami. "Swami, I hope you never have to come back to this world, and I hope I never have to come back either. But if you come again, I'll come with you." She said it just like that. She was hours away from leaving this world altogether. She had a very childlike way of speaking, so I tend to imitate that. But I was so touched by that. There she was, dying of cancer. She was actually in quite a lot of pain. She was on morphine. One of the nurses said to me in the last day or two of her life, the nurses were concerned because she hadn't passed any urine for quite some time. She wasn't on a catheter, but she hadn't passed any urine. And she was just sitting on this bed, I guess it was. I said, "Paula, the nurses are a little concerned because you haven't passed any urine." She looked at me in her way. She looked at me like this. She said, "I hope to die before I have to pee again." And I said, "It's painful?" And she said, "Oh yeah, it's painful." But there was no sign of that. She was on morphine, and she noticed when it was time for the morphine. But that's where she was, and yet at the same time it was, "Swami, if you have to come back, I'll come back with you." That's the spirit, isn't it? Not for any reason except love for him and gratitude for what he's done, and because she was the disciple of a great master. And if there was work to do, then let me be the one who comes to do it, because nothing happens when we die. We're exactly who we've always been. And if we want to help, of course we still want to help. Why would we not? So, my friends, God bless you.